Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank everybody that has taken part in the debate today. Members, time and time again, this Assembly has failed to face up to the issues which are supposedly addressed in this report. Attempts to raise matters related to this scandal have been shut down in this chamber and in committee. Frankly, many within this chamber are terrified of upsetting the consensus, and the lack of names on the speaking list is testament to the fact that most members of this House simply want this issue to go away. That said, it appears that parties have decided that they cannot be seen to vote against the motion. I welcome the fact that at long last the Assembly has displayed some willingness to tackle these issues. I would remind members that having been forced to debate this motion and having been forced to calculate that they cannot be seen to vote against it, there is an onus for action to be taken. For all the talk of some during elections about their ability to be the only people to confront Sinn Fein, it took a single TUV member to bring this matter to the floor. The suggestion contained in the report that it is impossible to distinguish between party political and constituency work needs knocked on the head. In 2012, the Independent Financial Review Panel ruled constituency funding is specifically not to be used for party political purposes because, and I quote, political parties are financed separately through the Financial Assistance for Political Parties scheme. Tellingly, a former member of the Independent Financial Review Panel described the conclusion in this report that it was difficult or even impossible to distinguish between political and constituency work as astonishing. We also learned from that member that the head of legal services made no attempt to clear up the confusion in his own mind by contacting members of the panel to see how they drew a distinction he felt was impossible. As Sam McBride has observed, this report, if accepted, opens up the potential for a £10 million pot of public money to seep into political parties. Members, that cannot be right, that cannot be allowed to happen. Other issues raised by the whole McMonagle scandal remain live. Something which has received relatively little attention is the fact that because Sinn Fein, and specifically North Antrim MLA Philip McGuigan, who was their sole contributor, failed to cancel Michael McMonagle's Assembly pass, he could come and go as he pleased from Parliament buildings. In order to probe this issue, I asked the Assembly Commission to detail the number of times, including dates, that Michael McMonagle entered Parliament buildings since being charged with sexual offences against children, that any groups, including schools and youth groups, visited Parliament buildings on the dates Michael McMonagle was in the Parliament buildings during this period. The Commission told me that they have absolutely no idea. There are profoundly serious child protection issues involved here, issues which should not be ignored merely because the political and media establishment believe that the rotten institutions of the Belfast Agreement are more important than child safety. Given the reluctance of people to flood the speaking list for today's debate, I suspect there will not be a rush to do this, but I would remind members that this scandal and the disgraceful slurs thrown at the British Heart Foundation, both by Miss O'Neill and Minister Murphy, prompted me to table a motion of no confidence in both ministers. Members, you're still very welcome to sign it. It's in the Business Office. Since it was tabled, Miss O'Neill has provided ample evidence of her unfitness for office, none more so than her attendance at IRA commemorations. This Assembly has damaged its own reputation in how it has sought to evade the issues related to this scandal. The credibility of the committee system is in tatters. The confidence of the public in Stormont's ability to properly manage money is through the floor. And that, importantly, at a point when public finances are under pressure like never before. So when this motion is passed by the Assembly, there's an onus on the Assembly Commission to go back to the drawing board on this issue, to get someone who is serious about getting to the truth, rather than someone who approached this issue from the premise that MLAs are to be taken at their word, regardless of where the evidence leads, to put pressure and measures in place to ensure that money does not flow from constituency needs to party political operations. I would also remind members that if you don't force a division on this motion today, you are accepting the First Minister either misled this House when she described Mr McGlinchey and Mr McMonagle as press officers, or that her party and she, as an individual who employed Michael McMonagle as a constituency worker, misused public money. In any assembly or parliament worthy of the name, that would be a resigning matter. Any party with dignity and respect for democratic norms would refuse to partner people in government who have been abusing public money in such a blatant fashion. But democratic norms do not apply to Northern Ireland. Members have shown a remarkable ability to overlook the IRA's ill-gotten gains from the Northern Bank, the murder of Paul Quinn, the Maria Cahill abuse, the continued role of the IRA Army Council in overseeing Sinn Fein and retaining its
Mr Gaston, could you return to the terms of the motion, please?
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The Assembly expenses scandal which surrounded Sinn Fein 11 years ago when BBC Spotlight lifted the lid on Research Services Ireland. Mr Speaker, I will go through some and wind up on some of the contributions today. As I've already said, Mr McGuigan was the Sinn Fein sole contributor. He was the man that didn't cancel the pass. Here today, there was no response to the points made. The DUP, Diane Dodds, highlighted that questions still exist and indeed to this day are unanswered. And yes, I'm very aware that audits do exist, but my problem is that the audits that exist didn't pick up on this scandal. That's why we need to get back to the drawing board. They need to become more robust to ensure that this doesn't happen in future. The Alliance, Owen Tennyson, raises serious matters of concern. He was saying, unfortunately, it was an Alliance member that shielded the First Minister when she came to committee. It was your chair that shielded Michelle O'Neill from answering the questions when committee members were putting them directly to her. The Ulster Unionist Mr Butler reminded this House about the links in this scandal, how it unfortunately come back to the British Heart Foundation and involved them when it really didn't need to, and that is a shameful slur that was put upon them by Miss O'Neill and Mr Murphy in this House. The SDLP, Mr O'Toole, the Leader of Opposition, calls into question the competence of the First Minister. Yes, I agree, and I agree with his comments that it's absurd and insults intelligence that we can't make a difference between party and constituency work. Every MLA that spoke in this debate today, apart from Sinn Fein, has accepted the First Minister has questions to answer. Mr Carroll, who put in an amendment to deal with the FAP issue, I'm glad when he spoke today that he brought that up, and indeed reminded the House of in the past where we've had many MLAs paying family members, indeed we've had the RHI, that this House, it reminds us, is tainted with scandals from mandate to mandate, from year to year. And indeed I agree with him when it comes to the FAP scheme and how it was a carve-up for the bigger parties, namely the DUP and Sinn Fein and Alliance. My goodness, they don't like the voice of opposition here in the corner. There's not very many of us, but we do take the opportunity to try and hold them to account where possible. My encouragement to the SDLP is when they talk about constructive opposition, it is about time they take off the gloves, because this executive certainly needs held to account. I'll lay this motion before members. It's sad that it took one MLA to bring it to the attention and put it on the order paper, but that I have tried to do. And on that basis, I trust that all parties, including Sinn Fein, will be supporting it here today.
Members, the question is that the motion standing on the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Members, before we move on to the next item.